Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about property rights and natural resource damage assessment written by Daniel Bromley. To go through the article, it basically can be separated by four main parts. They are policy posted at the end of 20th century, the economics of restoration, WTA's advantage against WTP under two policies named CERCLA and OPA, and how decisive the policy is in terms of estimating cost and benefit. So, in author's opinion, it is conceptually incoherent to estimate natural resource damages using estimates of willingness to pay derived from service of those whose welfare is thought to have diminished. This preference for estimating willingness to pay may be due to confusion about the correct economic approach to the new legal environment that damages natural resources. What's more, the more important aspect is to increase one of the cost of the pollution incident to the responsible party. This emphasizes the incentives for future behavior. If the losses caused by pollution accidents are wrongly measured, the shadow prices of leaks and accidents will be wrong. So, wrong signals will be sent to producers and consumers. These incorrect signals will cause too many overflows and accidents. Therefore, damages from pollution should be correctly measured. Under the policies of Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, named CERCLA, and Oil Pollution Act, OPA, Daniel Bromley analyzed and pointed out which way is more appropriate by economical angle. Next, let's get some information regarding two policies I mentioned before.
So now, let me introduce the policy related to the natural resources damage assessment. The NOAA was found in 1970s, which focused on the change in the Earth's atmosphere and provide the early warning of severe weathers. The Department of Interior manages the land owned by the federal government. It also protects the natural resources. They are both charged with writing rules to give those mandate operational contents about the natural resources damage assessment. The Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act of 1980s is also known as the Superfund, which giving the federal government certain ability to claim the release of harmful substances that can affect the environment and public health. It's also liable for damage caused by the release for the pollution into the environment and the natural resources. The Oil Pollution Act of 1990s extend the federal government liability for damage resulting from the discharge for oil production and require for compensation for a wide range for the injuries. The purpose of CERCLA can be expanded by two parts. The reservation component and the compensation component. The reservation component is to restore both the public-owned natural environment and the service to extend the exact ecological concentration and in place before the event. The compensation component is to compensate for the loss in the service between the time of the event and the full resumption of the further service following by the reservation. And Danny will go further about the reservation component in the economics.
Now we are going to talk about the economic Economics of restoration. First, let's talk about the language of acts. The language of the several acts pertinent to natural resource damages calls for the restoration, rehabilitation, and replacement. Now the question is, are damaged resources to be restored, rehabilitated, or replaced? In order to figure this question out, we need to understand the meaning of these three terms first. First, restoration is the precise duplication of what was there prior to the polluting events. I provide a jacket example to let you guys better understand the concept. So at first the jacket is new and unbroken, but then it is damaged, and if we want to restore it, we need to make it looks as the same as before. The second is rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is doing some necessary tidying up so that the place becomes a viable system again, but it can be different from the former state. In this example, this jacket is damaged, and if we want to rehabilitate it, we just put a patch on it to make it wearable again. The last one is replacement. Replacement actually has the meaning of substitution, which means substituting the ecological services from some other location for those that have been damaged. According to the definition, we can find that rehabilitation and substitution implicits the impossibility of restoration, while rehabilitation and substitution may occur at the same time. However, no matter what kind of act is pursued, they cannot be separated from the issue of compensation. Hence, for example, if substitution or rehabilitation is chosen and the individuals are not satisfied with the cost-effective strategy, the compensation will encompass not just the perceived damages immediately following the polluting events, but even after a substitute or the tidying up has been provided. In the case of restoration, it is more complicated because under a policy of full restoration, compensation is just an interim measure. Restoration implies that we need to consider the reduced services into perpetuity for a non-fully restored ecosystem. However, compensation issues cannot take perpetuity into account, so it is divorced from questions of ecosystem restoration. Now we are going to talk about WTA's advantage against WTP under CERCLA and OPA. First, let's discuss willingness to pay, WTP, and willingness to accept, WTA. They are both commonly used methods to determine the monetary value of natural resources. Generally, people use WTP estimates when individuals face an opportunity to increase their level of welfare, while WTA estimates are used when individuals face an event that will reduce their welfare. What's more, it is often illegal to ascertain an individual's WTP to avoid a welfare decreasing event. Another interesting point about WTP and WTA is that WTA can be 3 to 5 times larger than WTP measures for the same event, which shows that individuals value possible gains much differently than they value possible losses. Next, I will talk about the frame of choices. The correct method of resource valuation is a function of perceptions of the norm against which choice to be made. This paper provides us with a good example. Assume a hunter wants to have the hunting permit to make his hunting activity be legal, but the hunting permit is only assigned by lottery. If a hunter is not lucky enough to win the hunting permit, like the first situation, he may have willingness to pay to buy the permit. In contrast, if a hunter wins the permit from the lottery, like the second situation, he may have willingness to accept to sell his permit. In both cases, the hunter needs to value the same good, which is the hunting permit. However, because of different decisions he is going to make, that one is whether or not to buy the permit, and the other is whether or not to sell the permit. The same person may value the same good differently. If the hunter is in the first situation, he decides WTP and he will value it with lower price. If the hunter is in situation 2, he decides WTA and he will value it with higher price. Also, the frame of choice is influenced by income effects. People with different budgets may value one thing differently. For example, if one is very rich, his WTA to sell may be much higher than who needs money in an emergency. Now we have understood the concept of WTP, WTA, and the frame of choices. We are going to explain why WTP is incoherent under CERCLA and OPA.
So why willing to pay is incoherent under Circular and Oil Pollution Acts? Before we talk about this question, we need to go through an example. People willing to pay only $3.5 to procure the need for a dam, which could save the waterfall. But they need $22 to accept the loss for the waterfall in building the dam. Why is that happen? The huge differences between willing to pay and willing to accept may not indicate certain fraud in the surveyor mode, but the surveyed individual believe that the private market goods in the set they choose are generally quite imperfect. The instinct of Circular and the Oil Pollution Act is to change the poverty relations of those responsible for the environmental pollution. The victim now protected by liability rules, but not by poverty rules. When the rights are protected under liability rules, the income is no longer a constant on the bargain because there is no prior negotiation between the two parties. This could explain why the rights are protected by the liability rules are well suited to the environmental accidents. In those cases, an independent assessor arrived at the fair compensation for the party whose interests have been harmed. Such compensation is the essence of both Circular and Oil Pollution Act. The Circular and Oil Pollution Act will give the new rights to those responsible for managing the natural resources and giving the new specific duty to who respond for the pollution. An individual adding to violating the interest of the others is liable for compensation to the injured party, and that's why willing to pay is incoherent under Circular and Oil Pollution Act.
Then, we are going to discuss how decisive the policy is in terms of estimating costs and benefit. In contingent valuation research, people prefer to use willingness to pay approach, although when individuals face a problem. The valuation approach used was obviously logical. So, we have seen an empirical approach that is inconsistent with the conceptual requirements of economic theory, and it is inconsistent with the new legal system established by CERCLA and OPA. Also, we can obtain a result that the value of natural resources is logically invariant. So, it is no doubt that the value of natural resource is measured by estimates of willingness to pay, but it is not measured by estimates of the demand for compensation. To explain the differences between these two approaches, there are two main points. First, the differences in how respondents perceive the context of choice. Second one is the differences in how researchers build survey instruments to accommodate that different perception among respondents. So, this means that different approaches generate different estimation when both focus on a same complex of natural resources. Therefore, the policies play an essential role when determining which empirical approach to follow. For CERCLA and OPA, estimates of the willingness to accept compensation provides the correct empirical approach. So, in conclusion, we know that new policies created new rights, which are protected by liability rules. Obviously, CERCLA and OPA try to change the behavior of polluters by thinking at economical angle. It is hard to say and force the damaged natural resources to be restored, rehabilitated, and replaced. The correct method of resource valuation is a function of the perceptions of the norm against which choice to be made, and it is also influenced by income effect. Also, policies always dominate in determining which approach to use. Hence, here, it is clearly wrong to measure natural resource damages using willingness to pay responses from those whose welfare is reduced by these damages because the cost of accidents, which measured by estimates of willingness to pay, are too low. Finally, if the resulting false incentives are allowed to keep guiding the behavior of those responsible for pollution spills and accidents, public policy will remain misguided and inconsistent with original legislative intent. Well, that's all. Thank you for your patience to listen. Now, we have posted 2 questions in our. Please don't hesitate to go and discuss with us. Thank you.